Hey, welcome to the Malibu Guru podcast and the Casey Aviation YouTube channel. Today's a day I've been looking forward to for a long time because I got one of the coolest guys in the aviation community and really just to get to take a deep dive into the insurance world. I've got Tom Hauge with me, National Sales Director for Wings Insurance. And let me just tell you, this is the go-to guy in the insurance world. This is the guy that's bailed me out of more jams than I can think of. And whenever I'm, yeah, that's true. And when I'm wanting the best of the best in the insurance world, this is the guy that I'm going to. So, Tom Hauge, welcome to the Malibu Guru podcast.
Thanks, Joe. Certainly appreciate you having me on today. And like I said, we've known each other for quite some time. I think we got introduced formally, professionally through the MMOPA group, if I recall, which is now PMOPA. But we've run into each other a number of times at conventions, and always admired your product on the sales side, the training side, and the expansion of your business over the years. So I'm very happy to be here, and I certainly it's an honor. I appreciate the invite.
I remember the guy that actually introduced us in terms of, or the guy that said, "This is the guy you need to talk to." And there was two of them because they were like buddies and everything. And that's Travis Holland and Chad Minnie. And both of them
Mm,
said, "Hey, you got to talk
yeah,
to Tom. Tom's the guy," and
yeah,
all this kind
yeah,
of stuff. So
yeah.
those were the
Yeah,
guys that said, "Hey, you got to talk to Tom." And I was like, "Okay, let's get
yeah,
in with it and let's start talking." So, hey,
yeah.
listen,
So,
yeah, let's talk about you for a little bit before we talk about the insurance industry.
yeah,
I mean, if you go on the bio on your website, it's like, man, you've been doing all sorts of aviation stuff for a long time. But
mhm,
one of the things I found kind of interesting is that you're from the Boston area, up in the
yeah.
Northeast. Is that originally? Is that home?
It is, Joe, and you would never know that I'm from Massachusetts. I have zero accent. I lost it over the years. I've lived in Florida. I've lived in the Midwest, and throughout all those moves, I lost that. I call it somewhat terse accent. You can definitely pick out somebody from the Northeast or Massachusetts or the Boston area by the way they speak in their dialect. But yeah, I am originally. I grew up just outside of Boston, about 40 minutes southwest, and moved away after high school, and I have not returned. I live in the Midwest now, but yeah, that's right. That's my home roots are out east.
All right. So when did you first look to the skies and say, man, this aviation's where I want to be? How did it first get into it?
Yeah, great question, Joe. I get asked that occasionally. I don't know if you remember Eastern Airlines back in the day. I'm sure you do.
You're dating
My fam,
yourself now.
Yeah, I am. But growing up, the big trip for big vacation trip for families up in the Northeast would be go to take the kids down to Disney World, right? And I can remember, it being 5, 6, 7 years old, and mom and dad would say, "Okay, we're going to Disney World." And I remember we flew out of Logan Airport. Then it was Terminal A. Eastern Airlines had the entire terminal. And I remember my first flight was on an 11 from Boston down to Orlando for Disney World. And I was amazed by the size of the airplane that it could actually get off the ground. And, ever since that first trip, I can remember telling my mom, I want to get to the airport early. I want to be able to sit by the window and watch planes take off and land. And that's kind of how it kind of got bit by the bug. It wasn't on a first flight. It wasn't on an introductory lesson or anything like that. It was just simply hopping on an airliner at a very young age and just being amazed by the size and the power of the airplane and that mode of transportation.
Yeah, and what an airplane, L-1011. I remember when I was first getting into aviation and I went to a place called Ardmore Air Park in Oklahoma, of all
Mm-hmm.
places, and
Mm-hmm.
they had what they called the Ghost L-1011 there. It was an airplane that was being parted out, and we got to climb all over it and get all in the inside. What a great airplane! I mean, it's just a little past my time as far as like me being able to fly it. But I think of all the airplanes, if I could have been airline, like gone the airline route, I would have wanted to fly that airplane. It would have been a cool
Yeah.
one for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Okay. So
definitely one. I've got a couple of them favorites, and that's kind of called my first love, I guess. But that's definitely up there as far as favorite airplanes.
yeah. Now, if you look at your resume, what I find really, really interesting is as an insurance guy, you're a pilot. I mean, meaning not just
Uh-huh.
a pilot, you've
Uh-huh.
got a
Uh-huh.
long history of flying a
Uh-huh.
lot of stuff.
Uh-huh.
Tell me some of the airplanes, kind of just breeze through. What airplanes have you flown and where'd you fly them? And
Yeah.
how'd you get to where you're at?
Yeah, I went to aviation. I knew I wanted to be a pilot, not sure, certainty on actually the flying path. There was some uncertainty if I wanted to actually be an airline pilot or be a corporate pilot or be in the business side of aviation. But I did start out. I went to Florida Institute of Technology down in Melbourne, visited Embry-Riddle in Florida, and ended up going with FIT. And spent 2 years there, got my commercial instrument, and I heard about this place called the University of North Dakota up in Grand Forks. And I had a good friend at FIT that transferred up there a semester prior to my second year in college. And, we talked on the rotary phone back then, if you remember. And he said, "Hey, you've got to come up here, Tom. This place is just out of this world as far as what they have, capabilities, facilities, size, the aircraft they fly." So I went out to UND in Grand Forks without even looking at the college, transferred up there, finished out my flight training career up there, went through the CFI program, did commercial multi, all that stuff, or finished that up and left there in 90, 92, 93. But I didn't really, we're roughly the same age, Joe. And I think hiring back then for the airlines was very, very challenging. You had to have a letter from the Pope, 1,500 hours and 500 multi, I think was literally the minimums. Now, obviously, that's changed significantly. The hiring landscape is much more favorable. But back then, it was really tough. I mean, I was a good student, but not a pro student. And those internships at FedEx and these other places went to folks that were 4.0 students and doing a lot of extracurricular things, which wasn't me. But just by luck, I happened to get connected up in the Northeast to a friend that was ferrying airplanes for people that had them in that area down to Florida to their winter homes. So I got to do a little bit of aircraft ferrying for light single and multi-engine piston aircraft. Nothing of any substance really. I finally at that time I finally decided I don't really I don't think I'm going to be able to get into the airlines right now. I don't want to instruct. No disrespect to certainly that side of the business. I had no desire to be a flight instructor, and that was really the only way to get hours quickly. You could build hours in other ways, but flight instruction certainly was the way to get fat in your logbook, and within a year or two time, be able to move up, take the next step. So that's kind of how I stumbled into the airline business. Somebody approached me years and years and years ago and said, you have a pretty good demeanor and aptitude for sales, and you're a good talker, et cetera. And they said, you really should look at a sales capacity more so than a flying capacity. So obviously with that, you think about selling airplanes or anything in aviation, whether it be finance, insurance, or other services. And I ended up getting into sales, but I ended up getting into airline sales, cargo sales for an airline.
Like
Found my way up
selling a cargo airliner or selling the cargo itself.
selling space on the airplane.
Really?
So, back in the day, as you may know, they would transport human remains in the cargo hold of L-1011, 77s, et cetera. I worked for Delta for a time, maybe about a year and a half, and that was my role. It was basically a calling on accounts to book the cargo space in our airplanes flying out of Phoenix. So that's what I did. But it was more of an internal sales capacity. And through that role, I ended up finding my way up to Minneapolis with a national carrier who's still around today, and met a few people at the airline. And with my background, I did a little bit in tech ops and the engineering side and the quality assurance, quality control side as well. And they appointed me the chief of aircraft acquisition for this airline. So I basically spec'd and acquired the airliners that they are still operating today. That was my role there. And then unfortunately 9/11 happened and everyone's life changed as far as what they were doing.
Remember, it's so interesting. We are of the same age, I think, and we came up with in the same time
Mhm.
frame because, man, in those early '90s, there was nothing out there. I mean, people just don't.
No.
There's some people that vividly remember it, but anybody that didn't live
Mhm.
that time, there was just nothing out there. I mean, there was very little happening in the world of aviation. In the late '90s, things changed, and if you look at the airline world, it's up and it's down, and it's up and it's down, and we've had an up for a while. There's a whole bunch of people that remember that the down's coming. There's going to be a time where it
Yeah.
goes down again. And
Yeah.
people like me and you try to get a fat savings account because we remember what it was like when it was
Yeah.
down. But
Yeah.
I tell
Yeah.
you what, I can. It's interesting to hear your story because we're in the same boat in terms of we went through the same tough times in a way that was not mainstream. We had to do what we had to do. We fought and clawed and scratched to get to a place where we were happy and doing what we wanted to do. For you, it was the sales world, and it worked out
Yeah.
really, really well for you. Okay, how'd you
Yeah.
transition over to the insurance world?
Great question. When I was with this national airline, one of my roles, in addition to acquiring the airliners, was to kind of oversee the insurance program of the airline. So it's just a large placement, billion dollars plus in liability, and I wasn't licensed at the time. I didn't really know what I was doing in terms of what my oversight was, but I was exposed to it. And the airline I was working for filed for Chapter 11 within 2 months of 9/11. So at that time, I just took a hard look at myself and said, here's my skill set. What right now, to your point earlier about the airline business being very cyclical, our business is too, insurance. But at that time, this was 2001, the businesses that were doing quite well were the insurance companies and the banks, so the finance side. So I was like, I gotta somehow, find my way into one of those two capacities, but from an aviation perspective, meaning, aviation finance or aviation insurance. And I went to work in an insurance with a reinsurance company because they were local here. This company called Benfield. They were since acquired by Aon. I'm sure you've heard of Aon. Most have. It's a large global insurance brokerage. But I was working in a reinsurance kind of an analyst capacity, and those people were just really smart people, way smarter than I was. So I figured I was in the wrong place on the reinsurance side. And I happened to have a college friend that was working for our company at the time. And I had lunch with him one day, and, we were both in the Minneapolis suburbs. And he said, because you're pretty bored with what you're doing just because it has nothing to do with aviation insurance. It has a lot to do with just property and casualty, fires, tornadoes, and whatnot. I had no interest in that. So in addition to being kind of outclassed as far as who I was working with, again, these actuary people are brilliant. I just didn't feel at home, and my colleague said, you should come to work for us. We do only aviation insurance brokerage. I was already licensed as an insurance broker, working in the reinsurance side, and the rest is history. That was 2004, so 21 years ago. Same company. Our company, though, when I joined, was a total of 5 people, and we are now 62. I think we just hired our 62nd person. So we
My
weren't
gosh.
we weren't even a speck on the map back then. We were a good company, a legacy company that was started in a brokerage that was started in '84, and the principal back then, retired and whatnot. But we've taken that company certainly to the next level in terms of size and clout in the industry. And again, through a lot of hard work and relationships like the ones we have with KC Aviation and your peer group, it's been a great ride, no question.
No question. Okay, so but before we get to what the market looks like and things of this nature, tell me this. What is it like behind the scenes at Wings Insurance? And what I mean by that is like 60 people.
Hmm.
If I walked
Hmm.
in the door, what am I going to see? Meaning there's got to be good like in other words, when you have a guy that just bought his brand new or new to him M600s, a late 20 teens M600. He's all excited. He's ready to go. He calls up Tom Hauge and says, I want to get insurance. Now, I will tell you, one of the first things that's going to happen is you're going to answer the phone because you're so good at that, at answering the phone, but you're going to pass that person off pretty quick to somebody. And one of the things I've been just so impressed with in your company is that the somebody, whoever that happens to be, is some of the most responsive people and really jump on things. I can't tell you how many times I've called you where you're like, Joe, I'm walking up to an air gangplank of an airplane and blah, blah, blah. And I'll give you a 30-second version. You'll pass me off to
Hmm.
somebody who makes everything happen. And so I guess if you walk behind the scenes and
Hmm.
that 2017 M600 new to him buyer,
Hmm.
what happens? What's going to go down? Tell me what it looks like behind the scenes.
Yep. Yeah. So there's two parts to your question. There are two answers to your question. As far as our physical boots on the ground presence, our home office is in Eden Prairie. I don't. if any of the listeners have ever flown in a Flying Cloud airport. But we have a complex black hangar, which we have our aircraft housed in, and we have offices on 2 levels. The thing that's unique, and you guys are well aware of this as well in your business, but there's a lot of remote work that goes on. I will be in the office once a month, maybe, to get my PMOPA magazine and thumb through it, or read other publications and check my mail. But I travel 110 days approximately a year, which means I'm sometimes overseas. I support the eBay show in Switzerland. We're potentially going to be looking at doing Farnborough in the coming years. And obviously the major shows here, the OPA organization. So I'm always out of the office. And to your point, Joe, about service, I demand good service. We all insurance brokers sell the exact same product. If you buy a policy from me with USAIG or Allianz or whoever it is, and you buy that same policy through another broker, theoretically they should cost the same, right? But service is paramount. If you'll notice, I don't know if you have any of my business cards, there is no home office number on my business card. The only phone number on my card is my cell phone. I don't like customers to call and get a runaround. I despise somebody that's trying to do business with you and write you a check for $20,000 that they're probably never going to see any fruit from unless they have a loss. I think demands exceptional service. That means not passing that person off, deflecting them constantly after I get their business written. I always say, if you have any issues at all, I don't care if they're misspelling on a piece of paper, give me a call. I want to know about it. So first and foremost, I think service is paramount. But I've got 1,700 customers, and it's physically impossible for me to the second part answer to your question. It's physically impossible for me or most brokers to handle directly the deal from start to placement. You have to have people that, put the submission together that goes out to the underwriting companies. You have to have people that, stay on the underwriters to look at the submissions to offer quotes or declines or what have you. You have to have people that quality control check policies. You have to have people that answer the phones at the main office, which hopefully none of those callers are mine. Again, I like them to call me directly on my cell phone. But so we do have a tremendous amount of support staff. I'd say our company, as large as we are, we only have 5 brokers that do what I do total. So, almost 55 people are mostly made up of support people. Again, policy people, account executive people, IT people. We actually have a Salesforce. We use Salesforce, and we have a Salesforce engineer, if you will, that develops Salesforce for us. So, we have a lot of different facets and different capacities in a support role. But, if you walked to your point, if you walked into our office today, you may physically run into 6 or 7 people total. And we have a large office. Again, we can house pretty much everyone, but a lot of our folks are working around the U.S. We have people in Florida, we have people in Denver, we have people in Chicago. A lot of remote workers, which gives us good time zone presence. So, if somebody needs a certificate in the West Coast and our office is closed, I can call a colleague and say, "Hey, we've got a customer. I know it's after hours. It's not for you. You're 3 hours behind. Can you get this certificate to this person?" So it's just given us a lot of flexibility to service our customers. But back to the original question that you had about what that deal looks like. So I work with a lot of good folks like you that trust what I do. I'm going to look out for the best interests of the customer, whether they be OEM dealers, folks directly at Piper, specific to the Piper product, all the OEMs, Pilatus, Honda Jet, Dyer, very well networked. I get a lot of phone calls from folks that say, "Hey, I got your name from Joe Casey," or "I got your name from Piper Aircraft," or whatever. So I always want to field that call. I always want to have that initial conversation. I want to know how they found out about me, what they're thinking, what their expectations are, et cetera. Are they insurable? Yes. What's that going to look like? And we do a lot of business in the owner flown turbine space, a lot. And I kind of know, after a couple of questions to a prospective client, I kind of know what that landscape looks like, within $5,000 or $10,000 in premium and X amount of hours of dual, et cetera. So what we do from there is our company is heavily technology driven, if you will. So we have we send a link out that collects all of our information, all the information that we would need to shop a policy. We have DocuSign capabilities. So we try to make it easy on the customer. Last thing I want to do when somebody wants to work with me is throw about 8 or 10 pages of paper in front of them and say, you need to fill all this out front to back. We've captured all the critical elements in DocuSign forms, et cetera, that the customer can fill out pretty efficiently, usually 5 to 10 minutes at a time, that they'll fill the information out. And if a customer has ancillary things that they want to put on a white paper, like, hey, I'm doing this and this and this outside of the normal things, and I serve on this board, I do this or that. Sometimes we solicit that as well to kind of package with the submission we send to market. So we have the initial phone call, we collect the details from the customer. Some folks are more detailed than others. Some just really don't want to be bothered with any kind of paperwork, and those are the folks usually that tend to be difficult to deal with. Our whole mantra is help us help you. So the more detail that you can put into your package, if you will, the more leverage I have when I talk to these underwriting companies. So we always encourage overly the maximum amount of detail, I guess, you can provide. Once I have that initial conversation and we start that data collection process, then I review the submission. We put it all together and it says, hey, John Smith's buying an M600. Here's what it looks like. I'll review that and say, okay, well, I might find a loophole where the guy is going to get he doesn't have an instrument rating, but he may get it within a week of the airplane closing. So we'll have to have maybe a separate bullet point there to discuss that topic with the underwriter. Maybe he can just be dual only for that week or what have you. Just look for any kind of loopholes or any kind of negotiating sticks I can find, et cetera. But then it'll be hands off for me. It'll go out to the market. We have our key underwriting companies we work with. We work with all of them, but if you're buying an M600, depending on your pilot experience, there may be only 2 or 3 companies that'll bid that. If you're a higher pilot experience guy and you're buying an M600, there may be double the amount of companies that will bid that. And I know the market, so I know which companies are going to be in the running, if you will, for quoting that policy. So that's where I get kind of hands off. It goes to our key underwriters. And in a lot of cases, if an insurance company really likes the risk, they'll call me. They'll call me back, say, Tom, I really want to write this one. I really like how this pilot looks. I like his approach to the transition. He's being real conservative. Some guys will call me and say, hey, I'm going to do 50 hours. I don't care if insurance only requires 10. I'm going to do 50. My personal minimums are 50 hours. And I say, you know what? Fantastic. That makes my job easy. I can offer that 50 hours and potentially get them to tighten down the premium a little bit sharper, because they're going to do more than the insurance company would normally require. And if that's the case, hey, how about a little something for the effort? Let's sharpen the pencil a little bit, right? So occasionally I'll get calls directly from the underwriters, but that whole process, Joe, takes about a week once the submission's out to the market. Even if there's only 6 or 8 companies that can potentially write it, no one gets back to you immediately. Sometimes it's a few days, and you got to call them again to see if they want to bid it, et cetera. So once we get all the terms back, we have somebody that puts a market summary together. I think you've seen me use the word market summary before. That's just a listing of all the insurance underwriters in the space. And this is something that we offer that I think is unique. We are completely transparent to our customers. We show them the entire deck of cards. We show them why this company declined the risk, because maybe you had a pilot on there that was 74, or maybe they didn't like the airport you're based at. It was right on the edge as far as field length and capabilities for the airplane. Maybe they didn't like, maybe they don't write business in New York. Maybe they don't write business in California. There's companies that may not write business in every state. So there's reasons. And I know, one of the biggest pains that I have as a consumer and buying insurance, whether it be boats, cars, snowmobiles, what have you, is, my broker just sends me a quote and says, here, your insurance went up 8%. And sign here, send me a check. And, you kind of, as a consumer, you're like, well, did you talk to any other insurance companies? Are there any other options out there? And, that's what I despise about insurance. I like that transparency. I want to know if there are other options. Does it make sense to move my policy, et cetera? And that's what we provide our customers. In the aviation space, it's a little simpler because, again, there's only 20 companies or so. So it's very easy for us to outline those 20 companies and say, hey, we got 5 bids for your M600. my recommendation is this company. They've got a way better claims handling staff. I've had great experience with them. They're maybe $500 more than this other company, but that's the value that I provide my customers is give them my professional recommendation, but also show them with full transparency who we worked with, what the quotes came back as, and what our recommendation is. And 99% of the time, the customer will appreciate that they know that we've turned over all the rocks and given them the best possible deal at that point in time based on their qualifications and the value of the aircraft.
One of the things I talk to clients about, because I will tell you, most pilots don't understand the aviation industry. And I tell them all the time, and I think I'm saying it right, you can correct me or you can fine tune this, but I tell them the competition happens at the underwriter level. Now, what I mean by that is I'll have clients that'll call up their broker, the dude that they moved up an airplane. They flew a Cessna 182 and then a Saratoga. And the insurance needed for that Saratoga is completely different than the way insurance is done for an M600. So they move out of that Saratoga, they're up to an M600. They're called their podunk broker, the person that knows very little about, has no good relationships. They deal with small airplanes. It's the Avemco, whatever type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they get back a bunch of results from that. They get their list of who responded, and their broker basically tells them this is going to be your insurance, and they're not happy with it. So then they think they can call up another broker and shop brokers. Now, you can't do that. That is not because the competition does not happen at the broker level. The competition happens at the underwriter level. One of the most key things you can do in this aviation insurance world is pick your broker well. And again, you can't come up with anybody better in this market than Tom Hauge. Most connected dude I know.
Thanks, Joe.
No, I'm being serious. I'm being serious. Because the competition happens at that underwriter level, you better have a damn good broker. That's and you want somebody that is it's like when you pick a lawyer. Don't or you're a law picking a lawyer, picking a flight instructor, picking an aviation broker, picking a banker. I will tell you that you better have somebody. If you need a lawyer, you want a tiger. You want a junkyard dog that knows how to fight. And if you want a flight instructor, you don't want somebody who's been flying around 7,000 and thinks they can teach you how to fly in your Mirage. And if you want insurance, go to the guy that actually knows what they're talking about. Because whenever Wings Insurance goes to the broker world, to the underwriter world, the underwriter world respects you guys. Y'all have great relationships with them. And that to me is the key. If you're a marginal candidate, meaning you got low hours, maybe an accident, maybe you're aged, maybe you're in your 70s, maybe you got hardly any turbine time and you're wanting to buy your first turbine, whatever the thing is, you better get the best dadgum broker you can find in the marketplace and go work because the competition happens at the underwriter level.
Yeah, 100%, Joe. And not to throw my colleagues on the underwriting side under the bus, but you'd be amazed at the amount of people in this business that are not pilots. Sadly, when I say that, I mean insurance brokers and underwriters. There's a phenomenal number of, if you read bios, you see the working on private pilot's license. Well, they've been working on a private pilot's license for 30 years. They still don't have it. We try and pride ourselves a little bit on who we hire at our company. So if I've got somebody working on my account team, I want that person to at least be a private pilot at a minimum and be able to talk the talk. When they see dual requirements issued that don't make any sense based on the pilot qualifications, I want them to know that, to question it, to push back on it, what have you. You can't do that if you're a non-pilot. And again, occasionally we get some really ridiculous requirements that come from the underwriters. And it's almost like they are looking at a chart and XY axis and saying, well, this is what, we think it should be, with really no understanding of that pilot's qualifications, because again, they're a non-pilot. So again, not to throw the underwriting folks under the bus, I just remember over years and years I've been doing this, I've got certain requirements that all you need to do is push back, because it doesn't make any sense if you've been in the seat and you understand, hey, this guy's got 500 hours, he's an IFR, he's flying this, he's flying that, he's very experienced, in single engine pistons or what have you. He doesn't need to do 50 hours of dual to check out in a Cessna 206. it's things like that I think our folks on the back end, again, 90% of our account team, I think we have 5 ATPs in our company. And we've got people that have, medically disqualified from the airlines, so they got to do our insurance. So we've got very, very sound account support team folks that are pilots, fly regularly. We own a Cirrus. We fly a Cirrus, 300 hours a year. So we operate all around the U.S. in our aircraft, and that reminds me, I think at some point we're going to need an upgrade. So we may be giving you a call.
I know where an
But
airplane's at.
but like I said, you want competent people that are going to bat for you with the insurance underwriters. Obviously, when we send a submission out, we get a response. They know who we are. We're a large outfit. We've been doing this a long time. We're boots on the ground with the PMOPA group, the CJP group, the Cirrus group. We're always at the conferences. We immerse ourselves in that culture. We participate in a lot of these seminars, speak at a lot of these events. To your point, you don't want some guy in a strip mall that may have been a private pilot 40 years ago that works for XYZ broker that does very little aviation handling your aviation account. It's just not a good match. You need a specialist.
You do. One of the policies I have at KC Aviation is if you work for KC Aviation, we will pay 100% of any license, any aviation license you want to buy. Yeah, literally. Yeah, and I have people that work for me that have gone private instrument, commercial, CFI, IINEI, and I have paid for 100% of that.
Love that.
Number one,
Love
it's a
that.
perk of the job. But number two, but here's the deal: I want everybody in KC Aviation to speak the language of aviation.
Love
That's
it.
the way I say it.
Yeah.
I don't, and I can't tell you how many times that has come back to help me because I mean, literally everybody at KC Aviation has the opportunity, and
Hmm.
I bet you 80% of the people that work for me are pilots that actively fly. And the other thing
Hmm.
that we do that I think that when you said you have the Cirrus, the other thing we
Hmm.
do is if we have a chance to drive somebody to the airport or to
Hmm.
fly to the airport, we fly even though it's more expensive.
Yeah.
You can't be in this world and say, well, it's cheaper to drive to the airport. No, if we got to pick somebody up in Dallas or Houston or whatever, somebody's going to jump in our Bonanza or our Cessna 182 or some other airplane that
Hmm.
we've got our hands on. And I'll have
Hmm.
multiple people that can do it. And that's one of the secrets. Like if we have somebody that's coming in for training or somebody that's coming in for a maintenance event of some sort, man, we'll help move the airplane because I've got a whole
Hmm.
bunch of people that can fly the airplane and love to fly and speak the language of aviation. To me,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the places where Wings and KC Aviation have the same mentality.
100%, I agree, Joe. And it just, I think it just gives you a tighter bond with your employee. You're letting them, expand their career, their capabilities, et cetera. Getting ratings, getting licenses. The unfortunate thing for me is I travel so much, and usually it's longer distances that I spend very little time in our Cirrus. In fact, probably 2 or 3 trips a year at the most. But most of my trips are out to the West Coast, down to Florida, Texas, or out east, and just it doesn't make sense. Obviously, the Cirrus doesn't make sense to go on those missions. So it does get a lot of use. We do a lot of regional stuff with it, and I think 200 to 300 hours a year is what we operated at right now. So we've got a lot of people getting experience in that airplane. To your point, in our office that can take a day off and fly right seat if they're not qualified in the Cirrus yet, and just get closer to aviation. That's paramount.
Okay, talk to me about how important the Piper M class community is to the insurance industry. Like, in other words, how important is PMOPA or the Piper M class, Malibu Mirage, Marine Matrix,
Yeah.
M500, M600, Jet Prop,
Yeah.
M700? How important is that class of airplane to the insurance industry?
It's a great question, Joe. It's very important for a couple of reasons. Piper's a legacy company. It goes back 80 years or thereabouts, back to Pennsylvania. I can't remember where it first started, but I think it was Pennsylvania. But it's a legacy manufacturer, just like Cessna / Textron is, and Beechcraft was, and so it's a legacy market. They're continuing to produce a high number of aircraft units, which is why the insurance company loves the product, because there's more premium that's coming into the premium pool when you've got a manufacturer that's building 100 airplanes a year or 200 airplanes a year. When the manufacturer starts limiting their production, and now all of a sudden they're only building X amount of units a year, and the premium pool gets smaller and smaller, and it's not as impactful in the industry. So when you see the legacy manufacturers that are building 100 plus airplanes a year, whether they're Pilatus, whether they're Dyer, or Piper, or they're going to have a really strong connection to the insurance market, provided the airplanes perform well from a loss perspective. And the Piper products, obviously, a tremendous amount of Piper trainers around the world, a tremendous amount of Piper trainers. My alma mater operates all Pipers, University of North Dakota. And that airplane's performs exceptionally well in a very difficult climate up there in the winter, and they continue to buy new units. Piper continues to build a lot of new units, the Archers specifically. But you can ride the Piper brand all the way up through the M700 right now.
That's
I
right.
mean,
That's right.
they've got a nice lineage of product. Some of the other manufacturers I hate to say they're a one trick pony, but they may only manufacture one or two types of aircraft. Right? Not with Piper. Their current lineup, as far as manufacturing, is what, 5 or 6 models, I think, total,
Yeah,
maybe more.
that's right.
So a lot of different models, some great lineage there. You can move up if you're an owner operator. I mean, every once in a while you read stories in the PMOPA magazine of so and so started with a Piper Warrior, bought a Seminole, then he got into his first PA-46, and now he's an M700 owner. So you can stay with the same brand if you like the brand, and move up through the aircraft models and capabilities. But the end state being a strong balance sheet, a significant amount of options, models to choose from, and a lot of production. That's always going to resonate well with the insurance companies, provided there's not a significant amount of loss history, which there really isn't in that Piper class. But obviously, PMOPA champions that product, represents that product, obviously, to the owner group and the vendor group. And the MMOPA/PMOPA has been doing it a long time. There's great advocacy there with the OEM specifically. There's a good relationship between PMOPA and the Piper folks. So, all in all, it's going to continue to be a very impactful segment in the aviation insurance underwriting world. The Piper products will be.
Exactly. Good. Okay, let's talk about the market itself. Because if you
Mm-hmm,
go back in history, I mean, if you go back to 20, I'm going to give a rough number, early 20 teens, 2010, 2011.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I mean, insurance was cheap. I mean, you could find it, you could get it. Uh, you could get trainers could jump in the market because they were trusted. People could get insurance with low hours and it was cheap. And the pendulum went from one side and now it's swung all the way over. And by 2019, 2020, somewhere up in there, the pendulum swung way over so much that if you were 70 years old, you were getting shoved out. If you were not an existing trainer, you were not going to have anything happen good.
mm-hmm,
If you were, you could get a policy and they would have a lot of hours that were required. The pendulum swung from easy to get, cheap to buy insurance all the way over to the other side were very, very difficult to enter into the marketplace
mm-hmm,
and very, very
mm-hmm,
expensive. That
mm-hmm.
pendulum that swung all the way back over here now is coming back.
It is. Yes.
Talk to me about the why behind that.
It's capacity driven, Joe. It's supply and demand. When you have a market that's flush with underwriting companies, what inherently happens is at some point they chase each other to the bottom. You are not going to write business as a new insurance company by pricing your product 20% higher than the competitor. So the only way you're going to write business as a new entrant into an aviation insurance underwriting space is how you've got to price your product underneath the competition. Well, that just continues to compound itself. And right now, we've got 5 total new aviation underwriting companies that have started within the last year. We have another one starting here in the next month or two. So what's happening is these new companies, in order to gain some market traction, they've got to write their M600 for policy for $2,000 less than a legacy carrier is quoting it at, right? And then that legacy carrier, to stay competitive, is kind of got to chase that new bar, which is now below what they were previously at. There's reaches a point in time where you're compromising profitability because you're going to have claims. Aircraft, unfortunately, are always going to have hangar rash incidences and accidents, God forbid, crashes, et cetera. So there's a point where you're collecting premium at 30 cents on the dollar, and it's not sustainable. And at some point in the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, some of these new entrants that were not able to maintain profitability because they were writing policies at 30 cents on the dollar and their claims caught up with them, they pull the ripcord and they're out. So guess what happens? Market shrinks, consolidation. We've got fewer companies. The aviation insurance underwriting market can certainly get higher premiums, which they should be, because again, sustainability is important. As far as profit and loss. So right now we're in a new market. To your point, the pendulum has swung back. The market has softened over the last 6 months. We're seeing, specific to the PMOPA class of aircraft, most of the policies are seeing flat or reductions. A lot of substantial reductions, especially if you own an aircraft that's under 3 million in value. There's a ton of capacity for that segment specifically, and we're finally heroes. The last couple of years have took a toll, personally and professionally, more so
Yeah.
that people are angry with you when you send them a quote and that their premium went up 17%, and they've done everything they were told to do, and they've maintained proficiency. Maybe they train twice a year. They go to a legacy and then they go to Casey and do 2 training events a year. I can think of a number of guys that this applies to, and they're like, Tom, I'm doing everything right. I'm flying the airplane 157 hours a year. I'm doing 2 training events a year. I'm part of the master class here, and I'm attending Casey Aviation's regional events. And I wrote you a white paper that's 4 pages long, and there's nothing more I can do. Well, unfortunately, when you're in that space where the market is consolidated and the insurance underwriter can get more for that policy because the market shrunk, you know, it's sometimes you've got to deliver that bad news. And that unfortunately has happened a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, to your point about when the market hardened. But right now we're starting to be liked again. Most of the quotes I'm sending to customers are, man, really appreciate your team's hard work. This is fantastic news. I can get 5 million in liability this year, and my premium still went down 15%. So we love that. I mean, honestly, it just makes you feel better about what you're doing. And I'm not going to lie to you that the last 4 years prior to last year was a very, very, the most difficult in my career in this space, just because of the angst that a lot of the customers had towards insurance. And you've seen it. I mean, we've seen all the website postings, and people were just, I didn't even want to tell anybody I was in insurance if I met a new person, because they immediately look at you kind of funny, like you're getting rich because I'm paying more for my policies. And obviously we don't set the rates as brokers. We have no influence on the rate tables the insurers use. I mean, we can apply a certain amount of clout and leverage and grease, but that doesn't, at the end of the day, that doesn't sometimes move the needle on what the policy is going to cost.
Yeah. Understood completely, and I'm so happy about this. I've had so many people contact me lately, and for some reason the elderly, I say elderly, when you hit 70, that are concerned, and I've been telling people, I said that pendulum is swinging the other way, and this pendulum's, it's like a battleship. It doesn't move. It's a big, gigantic, hulking mass. It doesn't
Yep.
move quickly, but it is definitely moving from one side to the other now, and back to a place of affordability and easier to get. So if you're a 70-year-old today, you probably have a chance of keeping your policy and continuing to fly, assuming you're healthy and strong and
Uh-huh.
capable, and you've articulated that well to your broker.
Uh-huh.
I just see good things happening in the aviation industry because it's a slow moving pendulum, but it is definitely moving back towards affordability, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and no question, Joe. And I've got a soft spot in my heart for the senior pilot group. Like you mentioned, I attend all these OPA conventions, CJP, PMOPA, Pilatus, Honda Jet, all these. I go to every single one of them every year, and it's for a couple of reasons. I want to stay involved in the efforts of the group and what they're doing to enhance or improve safety. But it's a great place to meet a lot of customers. And our business, unfortunately, is one dimensional. It's usually phone or email. I rarely does a customer walk into our office. And again, back to my comment, I'm typically not there anyways, but rarely do I get to meet a customer in person and just sit down and talk and have a lunch with them or what have you. And, it's remarkable how many senior pilots in that are obviously in our space that are of perfect health. I mean, much better health than I am personally. They're fit. They're training, twice a year, like we said. They're just doing everything right, and they're getting kind of stymied in the insurance market simply because of the age. And there is no age rollback machine. There's nothing you can do about being 74, 75. But I have seen some positive things in that segment in the last year. Again, with the softening market, I just renewed an M2. A customer of mine is flying an M2, Cessna M2, and he's 76, and he's 3 months shy of 77, and he's single pilot at an M2. So that is positive. That was something that in the height of the hard market, insurance underwriters were just looking for those type of policies to kind of non-renew and simply blame it on age. I think there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. The guys right now, or the girls that are still struggling with high cost of insurance, are the folks that are coming out of fixed gear single engine airplanes with 500 hours total time, trying to get into a $4 or $5 million turboprop. That's still a very expensive first year policy. The other Achilles heel in the market right now, and I think this is where the Vision Jet's done so well, is folks that are coming out of fixed gear piston aircraft wanting to get into a multi-engine aircraft, and they don't have a multi-rating or a multi-engine time. So, getting into a Mustang or an M2 coming from a Cirrus or something like that, those guys are still seeing a lot of pain. And you couple that with somebody that's 72, 73 years old, which there are some folks at that late stage in life that all they wanted to ever do was fly their own jet. But that insurance product is still a little painful. But for the most part, uh, encompassing the senior pilot side, most of the news we're delivering is positive. I have not had to tell somebody in as long as I can remember that, sorry, the underwriter's not renewing you due to age. There's no chance. You've got to fly with another pilot. That's a death sentence. And I haven't seen that. Happening. And like I said, I'm trying to blow sunshine at my customers, and so far it's been true. So that's good news for the senior
Good.
pilot group.
How important is it for a senior person to stay with the same underwriter? In other words, they pick your underwriter, and how important is it, even like if they get a quote back where there's some other new entrants to the market that have a lower quote, but they want to stay with that legacy group? How important is it?
Absolutely critical, Joe, that you do not want to dive to save. I'm not going to call it a few pennies. Normally, it's a compelling amount of money, thinking that short-term gain is going to be beneficial. What's going to happen is that legacy company that you just left, you are now above their age threshold for them to write you back, because now you're new business to them. And if you move, and a lot of these companies out there have new business caps that are set by their reinsurers. So the reinsurers are the insurers that insure the carrier. But at the end of the day, the reinsurers mandate that, hey, we are not writing any new business policies for a pilot over age 70. Let's just use that as an example. If you're 71 and you get your renewal quote from XYZ underwriter and they offer you a flat premium, but one of these new market entrants comes in and offers you a $4,000 or $5,000 less premium, and you move, guess what? You just burn that bridge with your old company, and you better hope that that new company is sustainable, or that they're not going to ratchet up your rate because they just bought your policy this year to get your business. I always try when that's in play, Joe. I think it's important that the broker is educates the customer. It doesn't just say, "Hey, I just saved you $5,000. You should move your business to this company. What a great deal. I'm a hero." Well, you might be shooting yourself in the foot. And I think it's important, just to avoid any conflict with that client down the road, is to say, "Hey, you can do this, but these are potentially the ramifications." So that way you at least got something in writing. If the customer can't come back and blame you for suggesting to move the policy. I always like to lay out the caveats when somebody falls into that bucket where they're over 70, they want to move the policy, and I want to make sure they know the potential pitfalls of doing
The key here is get a dadgum good broker that's that's going to know the lay of the land, especially if you're on the periphery, and anybody that's aging is going to we're going to get into that. And and sad to say, but if you look at the not sad to say, this is the PMOPA community, the M class community. If you look at the group, it basically is a bunch of people that are a lot of them in their 50s, 60s, 70s. they finally they most of them made a widget or owned a business or did something really great in a non-aviation environment, got to the used aviation extensively for their work and what their livelihood, get them to see the grandkids, whatever the case may be. And as they age into this, you also want to age in maturity with insurance. And the best way to do that, again, get the best broker you can
Mhm.
find. The best broker I
Mhm.
know of in the PA 46 is Tom Hauge, sitting on this podcast right here. So this is just absolutely critical. Tom, we've already talked about the keys that for somebody to be able to get a good policy, get a good broker, inform that broker of what you've done
Uh-huh.
in terms of like training and your dedication, write an extra sheet of paper that has data that you've gone to, training events you've been a part of. Talk to the pilot. Talk to me about the importance or not or lack thereof. Give me your opinion on getting additional ratings. There's a lot of pilots out there that have a private and an instrument,
Hmm.
and that's it. How important is a
Hmm.
commercial license or a tailwheel license or getting a glider license or a whatever the case, advancing in your credentialing?
Absolutely important, Joe. Great question as well. I always suggest, if you buy a 172 and you're going to fly it for the rest of your life, getting a commercial license really is not going to move the needle. That's a low dollar policy. It's an unsophisticated mode of transportation, if you will. It's not pressurized turbine, whatever. But if customers ask me that question all the time, should I get a commercial? I said, well, here's what you're flying now. Do you intend to get into a jet, or do you intend to get into a turboprop? And if the answer is yes, then yes, get the commercial license, because as you know, administering a lot of training and check rides, you're a DPE. As you know, that the commercial license requires you to fly to tighter tolerances, right? And when you go for an ATP check ride in a jet simulator, guess what? I'm sorry, type rating in a jet simulator, you're flying that to ATP standards. So why not get the ATP, right? So I think it all depends on where you are and what your path forward looks like. If you're going to get into something pressurized, certainly turbine, certainly jet, commercial at a minimum should be on your to-do list. And absolutely, if an underwriter is looking at a submission for a light jet, and one of them is they both have the same amount of hours, and one's a commercial pilot and the other's a private, I can tell you right now, the guy that took the advanced his skill set, got the commercial license, is going to be viewed as a more favorable risk, all other things being equal. But even, stick and rudder type, float plane, tailwheel, those are all probably more so with docking on the float plane side, but that complexity, certainly in winds and whatnot. But tailwheel airplanes is a great example. I can't tell you how many customers I have that operate light jets or high performance turboprops that also have a Husky or Carbon Cub or some other fun airplane. And they use the airplane for a couple of reasons. One is to keep their stick and rudder skills up, but also maybe to get into, backcountry strips and what have you. But that stick and rudder skill set in the tailwheel airplane, absolutely, that's transferable to M600, M700s, or another high performance airplane you're flying. So we try and point that out, when the customer sends back his credentials for his renewal, for instance. Hey, we encourage you to get advanced ratings and licenses. And if you do that, let us know. And I want to spotlight that to the underwriter. Hey, Mr. Underwriter, our insured here just got a tailwheel endorsement. He put 50 hours on a Husky last year. Fantastic. That's just a little extra, little something extra. I think it's very important to get advanced licenses and ratings. It's definitely almost mandatory if you're going to upgrade class of aircraft. Light jets, again, high performance turboprops. I don't think you should operate one of those below a commercial license level. Sure, you can get insured as a private pilot in anything or with a multi-engine rating, but I just think the commercial license and anything above that shows a little bit more dedication to the craft. Makes you a better pilot, as you know. You're going to be doing check rides, and they're going to be to those tolerances anyways. So why not just do it? Knock it out.
You and I are on absolutely on the same sheet. I think it's critical not only to get good insurance rates and premiums and policies, but just to make you a better pilot. I just
Yeah,
think a more
100%.
broadly trained pilot is a safer pilot across the board. Hey, let me say one more thing that I think is kind of fun. You have not been. I mean, let me think how to say this well. You don't. You don't go on forums and tout yourself and use it as sales work. You don't do that. This is more of a statement than a question. But what you do a great job of is going onto the forum, like PMOPA forum or some other forums, and speaking into a situation And you have done more good work by not being salesy, but speaking into a situation from a place of knowledge. And anyway, I just want to say I appreciate
Mhm.
your writing in the sense that
Mhm.
you've really mastered a good. When you speak, it's sort of like that E.F. Hutton thing. When you speak, people listen.
Mhm.
But you've done that because you've positioned yourself well by answering the questions or speaking into a situation.
Yeah, Joe, I appreciate those good words, and I think we're a lot alike. I mean, you're kind of cut from the same cloth. I mean, the way you respond to whether they be accidents or just advice, it's not the intent of your message is never, hey, call KC Aviation. We can fix this for you. Sign up with us. I never see that. And you write articles in Twin and Turbine and not only on the forum and other things, but my philosophy has always been surround yourself with good people that do business the way you do. We're not trying to get our phones to ring. They're going to ring naturally just because of our value to that group or that specific group. I want an educated consumer. I want the customer to just understand things. It makes my job easier when they're educated on how an open pilot works or how dry leasing works or what are the pitfalls of dry leasing. The intent's never to, hey, call me and I'll give you an answer. And, oh, sign this broker of record letter here and fire you. That's never the intent. And as you could, and I appreciate you pointing that out. I always think that anybody that's got to use a smoke and mirrors approach to get their phone to ring or to write business isn't doing it right. Period.
That's right.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, you have done it right. You and Wings Insurance have done it right. I'm telling the community right now.
Likewise.
Thank you. I'm telling you, there's none better in the aviation world than Tom Hauge. Tom, thank you for being a part of the Malibu Guru podcast and the KC Aviation YouTube channel. It's been my pleasure to have you on today and get to speak into the community. It's again, when you speak, people listen, and I think people are going to appreciate the fact that you came here and given us a piece of your mind and a piece of your knowledge.
I appreciate that, Joe. Always appreciate the invite and what you guys do in the space, and look forward to seeing you at an M Class event or certainly at the convention here this fall. Looking
Yeah,
forward to it.
absolutely. Looking forward to that too. Tom, hey, thanks a bunch. Hey, before we leave, how can they get a hold of you? What's the easiest way? What's the easy button for getting a hold of Tom Hauge?
As we talked about earlier, cell phone, text or phone call, 612-578-5055 is my cell. And I would be offended if you if you didn't use my cell phone. Like I said, I like direct contact with anybody that's questioning where they're at or that's looking for a change or even current customers. Cell phone and email is always best. Would encourage prospective folks to use those
Well,
contacts.
there you go. All right, insurance. It's a super important part of your aviation experience, and you can't do any better than Tom Hauge. I appreciate you listening to the Malibu
Thank you,
Guru
Joe.
podcast and the Casey Aviation YouTube channel. Joe Casey signing out.